Welcome to the Smart Distinguished Speaker Series. We're very pleased today to have Larry Yermack, who is one of the, I guess, trailblazers and pioneers of information technology for fare payment and a whole range of other innovative transportation, urban transportation technologies. The bio is in the is in your email, so I won't do the big long life story, but I want to welcome Larry and welcome to you.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks for having me. Thank you all for being here, and I'm hoping that we will be able to have a discussion as opposed to a lecture, but I'll tell some stories, talk a little bit about transportation payment, and then let's see where it goes. I think that the thing of Archimedes earlier today, and about if he had a big enough lever, he could move the world. And I've been thinking a lot about the extent to which payment systems in transportation might be the lever to move the transportation environment. We are obsessed with the front end of transportation systems. We're obsessed with, in the payment world, we'll talk about it. Everyone talks about tokens and about cash and about tickets. And in the ITS world, everybody worries about vehicle detection and lane detection and cameras. And it seems to me that the back end of the system is in many ways, a lot more important. So let's just, we could start with what I could refer to as in the beginning, which wasn't really the beginning of anything other than the fact that it was 30 years ago. And I was actually, around then, I was at the New York City Department of Transportation. And all of the transportation payment systems were essentially cash. Toll collection was cash, transit systems were cash or tokens, parking was cash, and the users were anonymous. Nobody knew who they were. I mean, you just, you threw your money in the basket. And that was what it was, and I don't think anybody thought very much about it. The focus of all transportation systems, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but there's sort of, at the time there were some paid transportation systems, there was mostly free. As we go along, we'll see that today there's a proliferation of paid transportation services and actually a diminution of free. But the focus was always on the point of sale. It was the token or the ticket or the cash. The way you knew whether a toll collector was collecting the right amount of money was you gave him or her, generally him actually, but generally, you gave the toll collector a tour fund. You gave him $20 or $30 or whatever it was. They'd go out in the lanes, they would collect tolls for a shift, come back, you would take a look at your system to see what you would determine that they should collect, and you would measure what they collected versus what they were supposed to collect. It was all about the cash. I actually once operated a money room at the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority that counted more than $1 million a day in cash. It was actually more than $2 million a day because we were collecting $700 million a year. And that's what it was all about. So it was back in 1989. I had just started working as at the time, it was a VP for finance. I later was appointed chief financial officer of the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, which is, to this day, the largest toll authority in the United States, probably the second largest in the world. At the time, they were collecting a mere $700 million a year. Today, it's probably something north of $1 billion. And there were a couple of guys in the back room that were playing along with what we called automatic vehicle identification technology. It was, it evolved into electronic toll collection, but it was the idea of being able to track a vehicle as it moved. And that was the beginning of what became the EZPass interagency group in the Northeast, which is probably the largest, well, it's the largest intelligent transportation system in the world by far. It's got tens of millions of customers across about 12.5 states. And the basis of it was a radio frequency identification. And just a couple of notes on some of the early days there. We had a huge debate about whether the technology should be read-only or read-write, with the ability to write to the tag the transactions that took place. And ultimately, the group demanded read-write. We never really needed read-write. All we needed to do then, and all we really need to do now, was to record a transaction and to take it to the back office. The idea then about read versus read-write was that we were going to do all the calculations in the lane. You were going to enter here, you're going to leave there, we're going to tell you how much it cost. Again, it's an extension of the everything has to happen at the point of sale. The two agencies, my agency, the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, and the Port Authority in New York and New Jersey, there's some engineers working in the back room, and they said to me, well, our idea is that we're going to have tags for this agency that don't interfere with the tags from the other agencies. You know, the tag that works on the Triborough Bridge, which is 20 miles away, which is actually 10 miles away from the George Washington Bridge, wouldn't interfere with the tag on the George Washington Bridge. My contribution to the process was to suggest that rather than having tags that didn't interfere, perhaps we could have one tag for the entire region. When we started out, there were 2 agencies testing. 7 agencies joined the coalition. Very quickly, we created a half a dozen committees. This was in 1991. 1993, EZPass started, and since then it has grown to, as I say, encompass more than a dozen states and tens of millions of customers and hundreds of millions of transactions a year. But I think one of the most important things that EZPass did was it created customers. It also created violators, people that didn't pay. But until then, everybody was anonymous. And all of a sudden, we had the ability for the folks in the agency to talk directly to the people that were using their services. I mean, they knew Larry Yermack's name. I had an account. They could send me an email and offer me something. And this was really unique in public transportation, and it has slowly spread to the other modes, to transit and to parking and to shared services. I mean, I know all of my friends in transit always talk about my customers and how much they treasure the relationship with their customers. But the fact is that they don't know who their customers are, because if they're just selling anonymous fare media, they don't know who they are. But the transit agencies are beginning to move towards, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, they're beginning to move towards account-based systems as well. There are parking systems that are moving towards account-based systems, and many of the shared services are account-based systems. Things like Uber and Zipcar and all the others. But the other thing that EZPass did was it established the need for back office. All of a sudden, the transactions were, while they're occurring in the lane, the cash settlement was not occurring in the lane. The cash settlement was happening later and somewhere else. And the fact is that the earliest back offices that were created were, and this is all due respect to my friends in other companies that are active in this business, they were an afterthought. I was on the owner's side as a consultant in several of the installations 20 years ago, and they were terrible. The engineers didn't understand accounting, and they were operating in a world of hard coding. So they had to write code for every single thing that went into those systems. And even with that, they still depended a lot on calculating the tolls at the front end, in the lane. You record the vehicle in the lane, you record the transaction, you calculate it at the plaza, and then you send a complete transaction with the toll amount up to the back office. But I don't want to forget the fact that what it really did is it created customers and opened up the opportunity for direct communication between the agencies and the users. Now that's, so let's take a look at today. I mean, today, certainly those of us in this room today understand that there's a transportation system. It's not just my customers and my agencies. We're actually seeing multimodal cooperation across a lot of areas. My favorite multimodal cooperation story was there was a session on bus transit at an International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association conference a few years ago, and there were no spitballs thrown, there were no dirty words exchanged, and in fact, the next meeting they had another meeting and brought the transit people in to talk to the toll people. There is a proliferation of paid services. We'll see more about that later, but Sue and I were at a conference in San Francisco recently on shared services, and in San Francisco there are 14 different shared services. And what I really wanted to talk about today was how the lever is in fact the back office. So let's take a look at what's going on in the cities today. It was not that long ago that the right-hand side of the chart was the bulk of what we saw: streets and highways, sidewalks and bike paths, all free and all paid for generally through tax dollars. But we are seeing a proliferation of paid transportation services. People are literally voting with their wallets to pay tolls, to pay transit, to park, to I have to look over my shoulder. On-street parking, off-street parking, all of the opportunities for urban transportation. They're all paid services. They're all separate. They all have their own payment systems. They're generally not in the least bit coordinated. So let's now, in any urban setting, we're going to see some balance of these trends. It's going to vary from area to area. Some issues are going to be more important in some areas than others, but these are sort of the general issues that we're dealing with as we look at the large urban environments. Fairness and economic justice across transportation modes. Virtually every civic leader is interested in economic vitality and growth in their area. We will talk about over the next few minutes the ability to reduce prices and increase overall revenues. I am not standing here as an advocate for congestion charging. Congestion charging, as wonderful an idea as it may be, has not succeeded in the United States, and I don't see any chance of it succeeding anytime soon. The question is really by dealing with the pricing structure and selective reductions, can we in fact effect improvements in the transportation system and reductions in congestion? The environment is not just an issue for sustainability, but also an issue for an issue of energy consumption and conservation. There are no shortage of institutional issues between transportation agencies across the country. The more congested, the more compact a city is, the more transportation agencies there are, and generally, the closer they are to serving the same market with the same service, the more difficult the institutional relationships are. Bus and rail companies have more trouble with each other than parking companies and toll agencies. And finally, does this all, and when I use the phrase public perception, I mean, is a public official going to gain or lose votes by instituting a new scheme? The traditional approach to managing an account, and we talked about it before, was to manage the account at the transponder level, even with electronic toll collection, to manage it at the transponder level, at the tag level, at the token level. And the financial processing system, as I said before, was an afterthought. If we place the financial transaction processing system in the middle, then in fact, we have the ability to solve some of the problems that we are hearing from the transportation, from the agencies. And that is that the accounting systems that we see that have been added on as an afterthought, not only are they inflexible and expensive to manage, they're really not doing a very good job. They're losing transactions. They're not able to trace back to what actually happened in the lane. Any decent chief financial officer of a public agency will want to know if they have to make an adjusting entry to their books that money is not there. They don't want to know just that it was a violator or just that it was a problem in the lane. They want to know exactly what transaction, on what day, and what location was the cause of that not being collected. And that's the responsibility of a public official to trace that back. The existing systems can't do that. A financial transaction, a financial back office does do that. Or to put it another way, we're not talking about transportation systems, financial back offices. We're talking about a financial back office that serves a transportation system. I don't know why processing my payment on a toll system is any different than processing a charge that I make in Macy's. And I have traceability when I spend money at Macy's. And so these are some of the things that we see emerging as trends that both the customers are interested in and the agencies are interested in. Integration of payment and information systems. I have not spoken to a single person who I said, well, if you could have all of your transportation payment on one account, would that be a good idea? Virtually everybody says, that's a good idea, I'd like that. And in fact, if you can integrate all transportation payments into one account, then it actually has another ancillary benefit, and that is that currently 511 traveler information systems are generally unfunded. There is no financial stream to support traveler information systems. If the traveler information system was a part of a larger payment system, all of a sudden there are interested parties in paying for that system and providing the best transportation information to the customers. Smarter journey planning. How do I get from, and I'll use a New York example because I grew up there, how do I get from Long Island to New Jersey? Bus, train, bus, train. I mean, I don't know how to do it. And if I could do it, how many different payment media do I need to use? I mean, it's so daunting, people don't bother, even if it could be a simple trip. The ability to integrate fares and payments, and integrate fares together in one structure. And this is really where the sort of the beauty part of the whole system is. If I was sitting at dinner some months ago with some friends in San Francisco, and we were talking about the fact that we're talking about integrating into one account tolls and transit. And they said, well, you know, if you could integrate tolls, transit, and parking together, that would be enough to really change people's behavior. Because now you have the ability to vary the price of the three most important transportation services that people use, and by adjusting that slightly, perhaps make significant impacts on the way people travel. Enhanced operational planning information. We talked a little bit before about data mining. Data mining is not really my area, but with all of this information available, it provides both real-time operational information as to there are a lot of people that are taking the train right now. We ought to get taxi cabs to them where they're getting off because there's inadequate transit and they're all going to the blah, blah, blah event, to the vast trove of information available to agencies for capital planning purposes. Better informed passengers, we talked about that before. If a number of agencies work together to have a single account transportation system, they would undoubtedly have reduced operational costs, and it would all feed into an integrated incident and crisis management system. Many cities have integrated operations centers. They don't always have the most adequate, the best information they need to operate it. So the future that I am envisioning here is a single transportation account to cover transit and parking and tolls and all other services. And I'm talking about an account-based system. Now I usually carry all of my transit payment cards. Only strange people in this business carry on multiple transit cards. In San Francisco, there's something called the Clipper card system. I can use this for the ferry, for BART, and for the bus company in San Francisco. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the other operations that Cubic has managed to do that. But it's an account-based system. It's something I can use at a point of sale terminal that's associated with my name, my address, and my payment media. I and the other colleagues of mine at Cubic have been spending a lot of time talking to folks about these ideas, and we're learning a fair amount. We're learning, of course, and you probably know this, that the world is becoming increasingly urbanized, with a majority of the world's population moving towards the cities, and the two most important urban demographic groups are the millennials and the boomers. And I always joke that anytime you introduce new technology, you have to try it out on someone who's 22 and 65. If it works with them, it'll work with anybody. And the technology is changing. We are all connected to our mobile devices. The percentage of people, I don't know the numbers offhand, but there's a increasing penetration of mobile devices worldwide. We're living with always-on push technology. We're not asking for information. It's coming to us as it operates. We're dealing with high-speed data networks on high-speed, low-cost networks. We were talking before about how spoiled we are by our telecommunications. I expect to be in touch with everything that's going on in my life all the time, and if I need to make a plane reservation, I'm going to do it from my cell phone. And I do, all the time. And what we're seeing from the side of the customers is that they're not happy with the legacy systems, that hard-coded systems are inflexible, changes are expensive and time-consuming. I talked a little bit before about the chief financial officers of public agencies. They are accountable for the revenue. The agencies are searching for flexibility in the systems, and everybody talks about the customer. So I'm going to offer the next few slides sort of and the rest of the presentation, I'm not really doing this to present to you or to sell to you in any way, shape, or form what Cubic is doing. I'm really doing it as an example of what we are doing to address the transportation needs, and I don't doubt that other companies will come along with similar ideas at some point. They're just not there yet. But Cubic has built a system of platforms called Next City that provides for a one-account model for all of the modes of transportation that are available, and it provides for all the pieces of that accounting system it needs. The only piece that's not built yet is Next Guide, which is a route planning system, and there are actually too many route planning systems to choose from to include. I'm actually, and some of you know, I'm supposed to be retired, and I'm now working most of my time with Cubic because I like the company a great deal. I think they have a very innovative view of what needs to be done in transportation, and they have quite a history of innovation in transit, going back to the AFC system for BART back in '74, the MetroCard system in New York in '91, and the Chicago system I'll talk about in a minute. The New York system actually, Cubic maintains, I love this, Cubic maintains over 500 million cards in their database. Every single card that was ever issued is maintained actively in the database in case someone can show up with it. But they have an interesting history of innovation, but they have even more so an interesting history of real-time installation. The Ventra card system has been deployed in Chicago. There were a couple of hiccups in the early days of the hardware, but it's the first full-scale open loop rollout in the United States, actually maybe the first full-scale rollout in the world. Since they've opened up more than 1 million accounts, and 73% of the users of the system are using the system. Now, this is a system that either uses a debit card, the Ventra debit card, which you could use on the CTA, or they're also rolling it out on Pace, which is a suburban bus company, and Metra, the suburban rail company. You could either use this debit card there, or you could use it to buy things in the city, or you could use your own debit card to enter into the system. So it's truly an open payment system, as opposed to the historic legacy, the legacy transit systems, which were, buy my equipment and use my gates and use my fare media. And the cubic approach to building the system for Chicago and the cubic approach to building the system, which we're building out for tolling now, is to build out this account-based solution for more than just transit, for more than just tolling, to in fact have a platform that can be used across all transportation modes with multiple agencies, and to allow every agency to have its own business rules. Now, if you're not running a transportation agency, that may not mean very much to you. But if you were, you would consider that the heart of the matter. I've got to decide how my customers use my system, what the rules are, what the fare structure is, and I can't compromise on that because that's what I've got to do because it's my system. Cubic has approached it by saying, okay, you don't have to compromise on business rules. Your business rules are yours. It's incorporated into the design. Designed around financial accountability, which we talked about before, and designed to provide superb customer service. It needs to be able to integrate multiple agencies. Chicago's integrating 3. London, actually, I don't know if I have a slide on the Oyster card system. The London Oyster card system has 15 agencies, and the San Francisco card that I showed you has 8. There's a little bit of bragging about the company. The company needed to roll out a new fare collection system for the London Olympics in 2012, and they didn't ask whether the Olympics could be delayed if the system had a glitch. So it rolled out on time and actually tripled the volume of usage on the London system over the course of the Olympics, from 5 to 15 million transactions a day without a hiccup. This is a little more information than you probably want, but I do, along the top are the cubic modules that we talked about before. On the bottom are all of the interfaces to hardware that would exist. The thing that I wanted to say about this, and the reason that this system is leapfrogging the legacy systems, is it's saying, as I said before, it's not a toll collection system, it's not a transit system which collects money. It's a financial processing system which deals with tolls or transit. Well, in that case, why are we building custom systems? So what Cubic went and did, and they said, well, if for customer relations management, for all the screens that a customer service representative has to look at, when you call up a customer service representative in any store, any company, they're going to pull your account up on a screen in front of them. Use a third-party software provider. Use Pivotal to provide the customer relations management system. There are 9,000 other companies that use Pivotal. If you're going to provide a financial operating system for an agency, why not use Coda? Coda is used by thousands of companies. The Bank of England uses Coda. Cubic uses Coda for its financials. So this allows for a system, and the other one that's not up there is my favorite, actually. It's called Drools, which is a rules engine that allows each agency to create its own business rules. But this is really this is what a modern IT approach is to transportation payment. And the last, I'll leave you with two more thoughts, and then hopefully you'll have some interesting observations and questions to share with me. One is an innovation in customer service that Cubic is developing, and that is a video kiosk for remote service. If you walk up to a subway station in any city and your native language is not English, the chances of finding the person that speaks your language are probably not very good in the booth. In this way, you could find that anywhere. If you're at a train station and there was a huge queue to buy tickets right before a train, but 20 minutes later that queue was moving down the platform to the next station, it wouldn't make sense to have 50 people waiting for 2 agents. It would make sense to have agents on video. And in fact, this has been fairly common in private sector organizations for years to do this, and somewhat new to the public sector. So that's next agent. And the last one is it's all common to the mobile devices. It's the way to update. It's the way to buy a ticket. It's the way to update your account. It's if you're going to use fare media in a subway system to update the transaction, the fare media transaction on your phone by simply tapping your card to the phone, or even to use the phone as a fare media itself. So what I said when I started is I hope I've given you a taste of the ability of the back-end fare collection and transit and transportation payment systems to affect behavior. And I would welcome a conversation about that or anything else. So thank you very much for your attention.